Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who are looking for a deeper conversation about the movies they watch today. And so, yeah, let's get into it. That's right, everyone. We've got a banger of a show. We're still working through some of the Oscar nominees, some of the Oscar winners from last year. It is, though, I believe, only the second animated movie we've covered here, and that is Flow. But before we get into that, I think it's time to welcome my co-host with the most, the man, the myth, the legend, my borscht bro, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Great. There we go. They had to think about it. No, great. I actually had some borscht this week at the Jonathan Taves Community Club. Ukrainian family operates the cafeteria. And when they first set up, there was lineups out the door because it's genuine Ukrainian borscht and pierogies and halapshi and all that kind of stuff.
That's legit.
Yeah, and I was sort of at the St. Vitel Library, and the community center is right beside it. So I thought, oh, what the hell? I'll go over. And yeah, it was dynamite. They give you a little bun to go along, a lot of garlic. Yeah, it was awesome.
Plenty of sour cream, I hope.
I didn't ask for it, and they didn't put it. So yeah, I wondered if that's a North American. I didn't want to ask anyway, but they gave me sour cream for pierogies. I went back this week. So yeah, it was more of a brothy borscht rather than the creamy vegetarian one. It was more, it had meat in it, and so I thought maybe it's a distinction, but yeah, I was too nervous to ask. The way they called out my number is like number 4. I was like, wow, sorry, right here.
I'm on it, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jim. Let's jump right into the show. We've got, as I described, we're talking about Flow. It was the Oscar winner, Best Animated Feature, a Latvian film. Here's the log line from IMDb. Cat is a solitary animal. Never thought about that with cats, Jim.
No.
Anyway, but as its home is devastated by a great flood, he finds refuge on a boat populated by various species. and we'll have to team up with them, Jim, despite their differences. No metaphor there.
No.
Jim, why don't you, what it started off, before we get into the spoiler zone, let's talk about, is Flow, Jim,
No.
a see it or a skip it for you?
Well, as the employee of a tiny black cat, who's much like Flo, yeah, I absolutely see it. It's a great watch just to see how things transpire, and to watch the animals, and then it's got other deeper elements to it as well. Absolutely, and it's fascinating. I was there for the entire ride. So,
couldn't agree with you more, Jim. Definite see it. And we'll get more into it in the spoiler zone, but I felt this was kind of the anti-post-apocalyptic film. And see it only for that, as an antidote to the Mad Maxes, to the, Mad Max.
Yeah.
That's what's coming to mind right now. All right. We also, before we jump into the spoiler zone, I almost forgot, we do have a return visitor, Brett Woods. Brett Woods is in the chat, so let's give him a hearty welcome. Maybe an air horn.
Hey, Brett.
All right. Let's do this. It's time to get into the spoiler zone. Jim, I mean, this was a great film. It was a silent film, like great sound design, but no talking, maybe some chittering.
Yeah.
Plenty of barking, but really no dialogue. What else struck you that was kind of unique? I mean, there's a million things, but what are some of the big things that struck you as unique as you watched this flick?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the things that I did write down was that there was an element of, I have a bigger question for later, but there was an element of cruelty in this, mostly revolving around the secretary birds. One of them gets punished by his peers, I guess, and I thought, wow, that's sort of a very non-Pixar like moment, if I could say that, and it made me wonder how other maybe non-Latvian animators would handle this movie. Again, I'll ask that later, though. But I thought there was an element, because the natural world can be a cruel one, and we anthropomorphize, everything. Yeah. I'm a birder, and people see a bird in winter, they're like, oh, they're probably so cold, and it doesn't really work like that, But so yeah, there's
anyone who's actually been close to a Canada goose. Should know. There's a reason we call them murder chickens.
Chickadees are really cute, but man, they're tough. If it's minus 35, they're out there cheaping away, and they show nowhere. But so there is, I think, an element of cruelty here that I don't think other animators would really want to deal with. And it's not major, but it was just one of those things. There's one, the wing scene, and I kind of went, whoa, that's kind of harsh, and it's almost biblical, but
well, and this is a very, I would call it a broad film. You got grounded, and then you got broad, you got dramatic and comedic. They're the two axes I judge that kind of thing on, Jim. And this is broad. It is mythic. You mentioned the Bible, that leads to a question about the secretary birds. I really it's like, you kind of get an idea that these folks are a crew. The capybara, cat, of course, the golden retriever, the lemur, and then the secretary bird, but was the bird really part of the crew? I don't know. What do you
Yeah. Well,
like?
he kind of comes to, he does take charge. And
He does
uh,
know how to sail.
he knows it well. Yeah. Well, all animals know about ship navigation. Rob, didn't you know that? It's sort of a natural thing.
Hence the broad.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not a grounded film.
That's not a criticism. I'm just genuinely having fun with it. But no, the secretary bird, the role of the bird is very interesting because, you know, it's still got an attitude. I think I put in my other notes, I said Secretary Bird is Jesus, you know, or something, like, as I was trying to still figure it out. But, you know, he does have an attitude. He
Yeah.
sort of takes charge a little bit, but there's almost like the birds are almost like elves in Lord of the Rings. Like, they sort of have this bearing,
Yes.
and they maybe consider themselves a little more mythic than the other species on the earth, or you know, and then there's the whole rising up to the heavens and things like that.
Well,
But yeah, I mean, there's a definite role that I like. You know, it's different than the relationship that the other animals have with each other.
yeah. Well, and I think there is something about that. It's almost the bird knows where it wants to go,
Yes.
you know, and when the other beasts,
Mhm.
when the folks who are stuck on the ground, they don't get to fly high. There's
Yes.
no apotheosis for them, because that's how I really interpreted that final moment with the bird at the peak of that fingery mountain.
Yeah.
Was like kind of, and it may, for me, I don't know about you, but for me, I thought, oh, this is what the head secretary bird did when he broke the wing of our
Hero. Yeah.
ish, you know, like a temporary captain of the crew, was to deny that bird the ability to transcend,
Yeah.
to, you know, achieve its goal.
Yeah.
And so I read it after a while as, this will be a temporary alliance. The bird is only with these folks for a while. He makes no emotional connection with the other ones. Except for the brief time when it looked like the bird was defending Cat.
Yeah, you know, and there's almost
Even
a sense of,
that was the one I was like, that, if there was a part that I'm like, why is this moment here unless they really just needed the bird to be part of the crew for a while? Like, I didn't get that.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost a sense of duty as well. Like, he feels the need to. They're lesser beasts, so you know. I thought a lot about the role, and I still haven't really settled on anything. But you know, it is interesting. His wing is broken, but he can still fly a little bit.
Yeah.
He just can't do the long soaring kind of flying.
Maybe
that
it's
they do.
just twisted.
Yeah,
dislocated. But
it was also a message, right? It was like, you know, this is
just the way they held him down, and then
yeah. But yeah, it's neat how they handle it, and it's a different kind of relationship that the other animals have in the movie as well. But yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting inclusion there.
Yeah. Another animal that does make appearances, important appearances, is that whale. What is the why of the whale? Why the whale? What do you think that whale? What do you think its purpose, other than the obvious narrative? Got to rescue the cat somehow.
Yeah,
It's about to drown. But the whale does. The whale gets them out of jams.
Yeah.
You know, including when they're stuck
Mhm.
in the city.
Yeah, when the sail catches on a tree.
Yeah.
There. Yeah, I did watch a couple other sort of explainer videos, which I don't always do, but I thought it'd be interesting to see what some other people thought of it. And one person was saying that it was obviously a reference to the Leviathan creature in the Bible, and a lot of times these things that are bigger than us and the things that
Yeah.
are bigger than the carbon-based life forms usually are. They're usually seen as I was going to say bipedal, but that's not always the case. Usually they're seen as some sort of guardian. And in that, the fact that this wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't Jaws, like it wasn't a threatening thing. It seemed to be kind of huge but benign.
Yeah.
And it wasn't hunting them, and the music didn't sort of there wasn't any sort of tense. Yeah, none of that kind of thing. So it was sort of interesting thing. That's another. I was just sort of I saw it twice, and I'm glad, because the first time you watch it and you sort of just get the journey, like you sort of watch it from the journey standpoint, and then the second time you watch it, you're like, okay, there's a couple parts to this that are a little deeper than the journey. It's not just the here and now. Got to get from point A to point B.
It's there are layers.
Yeah, and then there's a reason they're in there, and they're not just side quests, and they're not just like a dream that a cheap sort of shorthand dream thing. I was gonna say the first time I watched it, when the Secretary Bird was looking at their towers that they were eventually going to, I took it as it was just a pretty moment. I sort of underestimated the intelligence of it. It was a pretty moment, and they were looking out because the sun was setting, and you had this sort of great landscape. I watched it the second time, and I knew that he was looking at
yearning.
And he was looking at his goal.
That's that's a great moment. The bird, unlike everyone else, the bird knows where it wants to be.
Yes.
The bird has a purpose. The others are surviving.
Mm-hmm.
The bird has a goal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, the cat, being our eyes, follows him up and sort of gets a little, ascends a little bit, but then is cast out.
I'm wondering, because it's the cat and the bird, an interesting relationship there, given that usually cats are killing birds.
Yes.
Although this Secretary Bird, it's like, it's the cat's not going to win there.
No.
We've got someone new in the chat. Unfortunately, I do not know how to read that. Yikes. Oh well. Sorry, sir. Jim and I are limited in our
I think it's Korean.
Yeah.
Kamsahamnida.
There we go. That's probably the extent of Jim's
it
Korean.
It is.
Where was I? Oh yes.
The cat and the bird.
Cat and the bird. But it's also the first animal the cat actually tries to make a relationship with. Not the capybara, not the capybara, not
lemur.
The lemur, not the dog.
Mm-hmm.
It was the cat, or it was the bird. Even to a point, there's a cutesy little moment earlier where it gets up on its hind legs, almost like in a mimicky, like it's the first. It's where he goes to sleep at its feet.
Mm-hmm. That proximity as the employee of 3 cats in my house, that proximity thing is a thing. They may not be on you, but they like to be fairly. I think a sign of comfort and acceptance. But and
safety.
And the scene you're mentioning is one of my favorite little bits in the movie. It's actually a nicely sort of Charlie Chaplin-y kind of comedic moment. The Secretary Bird's piloting the boat, and the cat gets up to sort of affect his posture. And falls over the side and into the water again, and manages to get back up. But it's sort of like that. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, and that's another like a maybe not a motif. Like there is some roots in the original short film. You know, that the director, oh, what is his name again?
Gintz. I had it up. I had it memorized and then I lost it.
Zilbalatis.
Zilbalatis. Gintz, yeah.
Gintz Zilbalatis. I guess it was a cat getting over its fear of the water. But, you know what? So you see some of those roots here, how the cat at the beginning is like, well, like so many other cats, you just don't see them swim a lot. It's not their thing. And it's forever trying to avoid the water, even trying to keep its feet out of the water. And then it's falling in, and then it's jumping in, and then we finally have the final moment. But there's also these almost like motifs of looking in the water and these mirror moments, not just as a mirror, but literally mirrored moments. Like at the beginning, we have a moment where it's just looking in the water and it's alone. What is the final scene? You know, him and his cat and their friends.
Yeah.
Their found family there. You know, but there's like a number of those little back and forth allusions. You know, was there any ones that really stuck out to you, Jim?
Other than that particular motif? Trying to think now. No, I mean, that was sort of the one of the main ones. And another commentator said it sort of was about self-reflection. Well, the lemur also has a mirror, you know, literally has a mirror that he uses and cherishes, but it's more in a narcissistic way.
They almost get trapped in it.
Yes, yeah.
Like
Trapped
him and his buddies, they're all wearing their fake crowns and
like Terrence Stamp and Superman, and they get shot out into space. But no, I don't think that was purpose. But so there's several kinds of reflection in here, self-reflection, and you know, in terms of the cat, I think he's just, I mean, he's alone, and there's indications that he's not been alone for long. There's a home. His human has left, or humans have left. And sort of in mid-project, and so he's recognizing himself as being alone. At the end, he's not alone. So I think that's one of the major parts.
Speaking of which, that was one of the things. So one of the first things I thought of watching this is it's like, wow, this is like I don't know if you remember this book, Jim, The World Without Us.
Yep.
And it spawned a weird little TV series. What was that? Sorry.
2007. I was like, that was out a couple of years ago.
I know. Myself too. It's like, what do you mean 2000? Oh my God, there it is, 2007.
Yeah.
Dear Lord. But it also had a number of film, like some of it was just like, it's almost like a weird little reference. I'm not 100% sure if there was any rhyme or reason to it other than, that's like in. But given that it's in the title, flow, water, they're following the wind, you know, really they're both liquids, right? Whether it be air or the water, they're following a current in some way. They're going with the flow. But it also made me think, every time the cat went up at the very top of the mast, sometimes in a storm, I couldn't help but think of Captain Dan in Forrest Gump. But there were other films that I thought of, but were there? What about you? Like, is this ringing a bell for you? Were there any other movies? And same in the chat, you know?
Yeah. You know, the one thing that it didn't go quite full, like, English animators in the 1970s, but I was thinking, how close this is. I haven't seen Watership Down in a while, but
Oh,
and
like
it,
OG Watership Down.
yeah, yeah, and it didn't quite get to where there's blood on the face, and there's like murder, animals being murdered and things like that. But it
Yeah,
had
the
a
tone, notwithstanding the
yeah,
cruelty you mentioned, I think it was more like the this had a much this had a different tone.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But I was initially worried that it would sort of go in that direction. Like, broken wing, what's next? But yeah, it, other movies that came up. Yeah, there, oddly, and I'm not trying to be funny, but Flo reminded me a lot of Gromit from Wallace and Gromit, with a silent, capable animal who you learn to like just because he's capable, right? And that he's
Competence.
competent, but also amazingly, without words, amazingly communicative.
Yeah.
And this is very, it's silent as you're saying, but it's very communicative. I like so much is there's so much communication between humans. I know my kids, when they're pre-speech,
Yeah.
you were still communicating with them, even though they didn't quite, they got concepts, but they couldn't verbalize them yet. And with my own cats, that I took the young one out. I won't make this a long story. I took the young one out, got scared by the dog next door last summer,
Yeah.
and it took off and it ran around the yard. And I had all three cats out. We usually just supervise them. And so all the three of us, so there's the little girl cat, was running right around the yard in circles, like just having a panic attack. And the other two were following it, and I was trying to follow them. And then she shot into the front yard and went to hide under a parked car. But I had the definite feeling that we were working together to calm her down. Like I don't know, it was actually kind of touching that we were all working as a crew to like settle her down, or at least get her to calm her down. And it was kind of an amazing moment. And that happens from time to time with your pets, that you're like, wait, you're communicating with me on a sort of a different level here.
Yeah.
Anytime you go to fix something, or you're putting together furniture, they're always in there trying to help. Things like that. But
Or maybe it's just curiosity.
yeah. So I would say, so long, a little bit of a tangent, but Gromit is competent. He's communicative. He's usually lawful good, I would say. And I think that the cat here reminded me a lot of Gromit when I was watching this.
Really?
Yeah.
My read of, like, I mean, the cat.
Mhm.
Cat is the character with the arc, with the biggest arc.
Mhm.
And they are a loner.
Mhm.
Bit of a suspicious, untrusting.
The lidded eyes, and the
Yeah. Oh yeah. And also, I mean, you could argue the capybara is the one who saved.
Oh yeah.
Saved Cat.
Mm.
And also, okay, just let me pitch this to you. The secretary bird, they are an omnivorous beast. We see them eating fish.
Mhm.
One did grab them. Is that the same bird that grabbed him? And were they really just fight? Was the bird that gets wounded, the bird of the
crew, yeah.
the crew, the first sailor,
Yeah.
the first sailor we see, if we don't give the capybara some credit,
Mhm.
was that the one that scooped Cat up and ended up dropping him because Cat was fighting for its life.
Yeah.
And really what the fight in the fight with amongst the other secretary birds was really just fighting over a meal,
No, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, they did make some. There was a distinction between the Captain Bird and the leader of the birds was bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the. None of them had like a scar or a missing feather or something that they.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But yeah, I don't know if I'd have to go back, and
Yeah.
that's an
Oh, I'm
interesting
just
supposition though.
But going back to my original point about Cat, I don't find Cat isn't competent. Cat does get saved. Cat is the one that learns the most, develops the most skills, and also is the one who has to make real choices, especially in the second half of the movie, but has to start to trust, has to be part of the team.
Yeah,
and it is at the end, because of those choices, because of that growth, that Cat gets the joyful defeat, let's say it does at the end, and a family.
Yeah,
Because it was alone, but always frightened.
yeah.
Later on, it's Cat is brave and a leader. And,
yeah,
is willing to risk itself to save the capybara.
yeah,
You know?
Yeah, no, I mean, perhaps competent wasn't the right word, but there is sort of a grommet quality, whether it's the critical thinking or there's something going along in there in his sort of intellect, we'll say, I still think that he shares with Gromit. Whether it's just his sort of his emotional makeup or his ability to sort of figure a situation out, perhaps.
I guess I am arguing with you a bit on Gromit, but it was mostly, it's like, hey, that it reminded me of the growth Cat has. Whereas, actually, you know what? No, I am arguing with you. Gromit is the character with no arc. Gromit's the one who just solves problems. Gromit's the competent one of a duo, like any good comedy duo. There's the one who thinks they're smart, and then there's the one behind the scenes who's actually smart.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. Yeah, there's no growth for Gromit because Gromit's actualized.
And thinking,
whereas Cat starts from a place and ends at a different place.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Cat learns, Cat grows, Cat gets emotionally connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I maybe that's where it is his emotional intelligence. Is that what the phrase is? Emotional intelligence?
Sure.
But there's something there, can't quite place it, but there's a capability there that the other characters don't have.
There's something about Gromit, something about Cat that makes you think about Gromit.
Yeah, there's a.
But we're going way off because that's not really the question I asked. It was what other movies? And you went to a next level of characters.
Yes.
I want to put one out to you.
Sure.
One we covered on the show. May need to revisit. Love and Monsters.
Oh, yeah.
This is post-apocalyptic isn't maybe the exact word. There's obviously been some major change in the world. Wherever the humans were, they're not here now. A flood has cleansed.
Those floods.
And then another flood came that we got to watch. But something's changed. Much like Love and Monsters, and here it's kind of presented as that, but what do we really learn about Love and Monsters is that these monsters aren't really monsters. They're just other beasts doing their thing. Yeah, some are dangerous, some aren't. And I think that's why I think about that film when I was watching this. because there is danger, there is peril, but it's not this, where it's a kind of man versus nature story. But unlike some where there's an evil beast out to, Jaws.
Yeah.
Where it's like in Love and Monsters and in this, they're not evil. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah.
Even the cruelty of the closest we see to human beings are perhaps those secretary birds.
Yeah.
But the rest, they're doing their thing. Dogs run after rabbits.
Yeah.
They
hog the food.
Yeah. Like everyone's doing their thing. Sometimes storms happen. And I think there's obviously one of the major themes is found family. We're better together. But I really do think one of them is like a critique of the apocalyptic movie, the loner, Mad Max. Like, Cat has to connect, to survive and thrive. Mad Max is forever the loner. He does something heroic and then he's back on the road. It's a terrible existence in a terrible world that is forever in disequilibrium. Whereas here, even with the flood that comes and goes in a mythic, magical way, you don't feel like the world is in disequilibrium. You buying that?
Yeah, I find the whole what this is based on kind of hard to put my finger on. I was just willing to accept it for the ride, but I didn't really sit down and think, well, it doesn't look like the city's been abandoned for long. So what do I didn't do any of that kind of sort of thought about it. There was like a banner or something with writing in one of the scenes in the city, and I almost took some time and paused it to see if there was anything that we could read to give us a hint. But I don't
think we're supposed to, actually.
I thought it might just be a little hint or something, or an Easter egg. But
this is what I mean about it. It's a critique of that apocalyptic film, but it's not, because it implies something happened, but we're not supposed to figure it out.
I don't think so.
Mythic. There's a whale. It's, interestingly enough, and I did want to ask you about this, but the whale is the only perhaps mutated. Like, it's a whale, but it's got weird appendages.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that seems to be, okay, that's not like the whales.
Well, even the animals react to it. They're like, what the, what's Latvian for WTF? But they're even surprised by it. Yeah. So, I was just willing to accept the ride. I didn't do a lot of thinking about the backstory of it.
Well, but
it didn't seem random.
The point.
Yeah, no.
To think about, it's almost like it's trying to disconnect you from the why just to present it's happened, because it really is a myth.
Yeah.
But it's a myth set in a cultural context where we have post-apocalyptic films.
Tons of them, yeah.
And that's why I think it is a critique of those.
Yeah. Well, and there's even just if you're curious about the world that this had been, I mean, there's statues of the cat. I thought it was just cats in general, but other commentators thought it was that cat. Gigantic statues that the cat actually climbs. So there was some sort of
scaffolding.
Cat worship
the final cat, the really gigantic cat that climbs up, it had to climb up scaffolding.
Yeah. Which was
like
a
multiple
great visual.
Layers of scaffolding.
Yeah. So it's a puzzling world, and I think we're okay to be curious about it, but that's not the point of it. I don't think it was. I think it's. I wouldn't want to see Flow 2 address that, for instance. That kind of thing.
And it's almost I see those as allusions to they're biblical allusions, and there's a lot of them in here.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily meant to have like any the
Literality,
puzzle.
maybe.
No, yeah, maybe literality. The puzzle, wrong word to use,
Yeah.
but I'm going to use it anyway. The puzzle here to figure out is not, oh, what happened to the previous?
Yeah.
Not important. It's about what it's thematically saying.
Yeah.
What is it really about?
Mhm.
And let me put that to you, Jim. What is
Mm.
the movie? What's it really about?
Well, we've covered some of this, but I was thinking really, this is all, it's rising water. And it's interesting, our depiction of rising water. When I was a kid and I drew pictures, you would draw pictures of destruction. So they draw tornadoes with your pencil, and the tidal waves were always high. Like they were doing that big, like 100-foot tall wave. But this one comes in a lot like that, the Boxing Day earthquake in Southeast Asia, that it comes in full.
Mr. Boycott? There you are.
Still here.
You're back.
Buffering. There's a lot of religions with a lot of floods. Why it came out now? I was wondering if this is sort of a metaphor for any kind of ecological refugees. Because they're we're going to be facing some interesting times in the next few years.
Yeah.
As the seas literally rise, and the cat ends up, seems to have a comfortable life, and then he doesn't, and he ends up in places that he's not familiar with people that he never knew before, and things he has to do to sort of
and
accommodate.
Think of those species. So you've got the lemurs, exclusive to Madagascar.
Yeah.
The secretary bird, Africa. Golden retriever, the capybara,
South America.
South America, yeah, exclusive to South America. The cat is although you could also argue the dog to a degree, but I in a way, the cat is probably the more ubiquitous.
Yeah.
The everyman of this story is cat.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it, and I was wondering this, is it, and they do it in a subtle way. Like, if I'm reading it correctly, or it could just be my take, you're like with poetry, everyone's got their own take on things, but I see it as sort of a bit of a fable about ecological displacement, and where they end up. It was sort of a foresty, kind of a glenny area, but he went to a lot of places that he was unfamiliar with, and he was on unsolid footing for a lot of it, and found a way to make it work. And so I think maybe that's a little bit what it's about. Maybe not they don't sort of hammer it, I don't think, but I think that could be. It's
only 85 minutes.
Yeah.
It's efficient.
Yeah. I think that could be one of the points of it.
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, there's some pretty straightforward ones. Like emotionally, it's we're better together.
Oh, yeah.
The cat starts as a loner, finds a family. Something that we have covered umpteen times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a trend in film or it's a trend in our choices of films.
Yeah.
But this is definitely one of those found family things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and maybe I hammered it maybe a little too hard earlier, although I do think that there's a part of it is it's a strong critique of post-apocalyptic films. It's also a bit of a, we could leave and like the one of the things I think is interesting about this, except for the human spaces, the place is teeming with life.
Yeah.
which is to go back to this, like one of the
Mhm.
points of the world without us, if Buddy's thesis is accurate, is the planet will be fine, Jim. If we all disappeared in a day, yeah, the planet would, kind of just keep spinning, keep ticking, and a lot of things would reestablish themselves,
Yeah.
quite quickly. But I like your, there is a more than a nod to the environmental, the slow moving environmental catastrophe that we're in. And you could say that what we're actually seeing in this is how it slowly builds the environmental catastrophe until sudden it's really quick. It's a ram, and then and all of a sudden the cat's on the top of a cat. Cat on a cat.
Yeah.
The cat on a cat rescued by a capybara.
Mhm.
And I think that's, so I agree with you there. And I also think there's an idea of cleansing, but also
Yeah.
a spiritual journey is going on here. Definitely for the secretary bird, but I think one of the greatest moments is, again, that allusion, that constant motif of mirrors and looking back. And so there's the cat, much like it was before, surrounded by water, a ring of water at the top of this Wise Man Hill, because that place kind of had Himalayan, Tibetan vibes. It almost looks like prayer flags every now and then, not, but almost, and it's looking down, and then all of a sudden it's like the cat makes a choice and it runs down to go be with its friends. Like
Yeah.
it looks and it's like, oh, I'm alone now. I don't want to be alone. Runs down. Then like all this training has led up to this cat kind of going, well, I guess I'm getting in the water. And when it realizes, it finds the float, the glass float,
Yeah.
and it gets on it, and it could go, the boat is gone.
Mhm.
And the cat looks back because safety is behind him. You go
Yeah.
back. It's a great moment. It's the key choice. He could go back to the island, much like he lived his life before. No,
Yeah.
but no man or cat apparently is an island unto itself.
No.
And so it starts pedaling forward.
Mhm.
And I think that's another thing going on here. And I think that's it's a great moment in the film. It's a great moment of visuals, true visual storytelling, because this is all visual storytelling. But it also speaks to the biggest message of the film, right? It's, the cat knows it could die. It's out in the ocean. It doesn't have control, but it makes a call.
Yeah.
It casts itself into the waters.
Yeah. I read one, which I think is wrong. I read one, and of course I read the comments. I read one YouTube comment, not on anything that we did, and it said, "Well, obviously the cat's got 9 lives, so he's okay with." I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the movie works like that. This one,
I will say though, that's I'm kind of digging that, Jim.
yeah. Well, that's the explanation for why it was, when the secretary bird got, lifted up to heaven or whatever, and the cat sort of went halfway and then fell back down again. So like, well, that's obviously one of the lives that it took. He's got 8 more, which sort of makes, I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, not going to change their mind, but it's an interesting theory anyway.
It's ridiculous. But,
yes, yeah.
There is a perfect example of someone doing a bit of a, as the kids would say, Jim, I believe they call it, whoopsie, make sure I got this right, a post.
No.
One of those things that's like, well, 9 lives. Tick, tick, tick. I'm a comedy genius.
Shuts the computer with a satisfied click and goes to bed. My work is done.
Comedy cast into the universe.
My day can't get better than that.
Jim, I do have a couple more questions.
Sure.
Wanted to get your take on it. Another visual thing that happens. It's cat's up on the top of the mast. Wakes up from a nightmare that it's being surrounded by deer that are just going around and around and around. Later, I believe it's later in the film, cat's floating in the water. It's already been saved once, so it's it's learning how to swim now, I think. Floating in the water and has a moment and doesn't seem frightened as the fish are swimming around it. What was your read of those? Maybe not mirrors, two sides. Like, I mean, they're referencing each other, or one's a reference of the other. What did you think? What was your read on that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't quite pick up on that. The movie sort of is bookended. There is that dream with the deer or the elk or whatever they are encircling, like running, and he's right in the middle of this circle, like in the calm of the storm. And that's typically threatened behavior. I did look it up that when they're threatened, they sort of run in a pack like that. But there's another scene toward the end, right after, like, when things have sort of settled down, when the water subsided,
the waters recede.
Yeah, and bam, the deer run right through the forest. They're still running.
Yeah.
And that's just before he meets the Leviathan in air, like just on the ground, who's obviously struggling, and the big eye is blinking, and he goes and sort of attempts to comfort the Leviathan.
But that's another mirror scene, because at the beginning of the film, he almost gets run over by the deer.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the deer are running past him.
Yeah. So the deer pop up a number of times. It's interesting that they don't interact with him, like they're sort of on a different sort of wavelength or something. But it's interesting. Yeah, I didn't pick out the encirclement of the fish, but and I think watching it a second time, it's not just the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, they like that image because it's beautiful. And I think you run the risk of underestimating this movie if that's all you think it is.
No.
That everything's done in this for a purpose. It's not just pretty sunsets or whatever.
Yeah.
And not that I thought that, but it's just, I think this movie benefits from a second watching, because you can interpret it as being too simple, like just point A, point B kind of thing. But
it's an onion.
That's an interesting pickup, though. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Speaking of going back to the Leviathan, the whale, why do you like? It is funny, after the cat sort of passes a test, rescues the capybara, real solidarity. Now the leader, but then the the um the deer run by.
Mhm.
Then he runs, not, I think he runs where they were running from. That's when he finds the Leviathan
Mhm.
and he comforts it, which I was almost like, is this the final test? The
Mm.
the moment where you really do see its growth, because this Leviathan is big, but there's a sadness. It's a poignant moment.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
But it again, it comes back to, so why, what is the why of this whale?
Mhm.
Why is this one dying now? You kind of say, oh, hey, well, the waters receded and it wasn't quick enough to go wherever the hell the waters came from,
Yes.
which is, I mean, literally, it's like a reverse. More movie references, Jim, like, because there are a lot of them, but
Mhm.
that moment is a reverse of the Moses parting the waters in the
Oh
Ten
yeah.
Commandments,
Mhm.
and the crack in the world in Raiders, or not Raiders Lost, the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Okay.
Because the world is literally cracking open,
Mhm.
and that's where those waters are going into.
Mhm.
So that whale, wherever it was, I think was doomed anyway. The waters didn't recede back into the ocean. The waters were.
Yeah.
So again, why is the whale? What is the point? What is the why of
Yeah.
the whale?
Well,
And
if you
why
want to,
does it die? Why? Like, is
well,
that the cat's final moment of growth?
mm,
Where everything, we've had this great heroic moment where he rallies the team. He even, in a way, he rescues the lemur from getting caught in the mirror.
mm, yeah.
He keeps going to find his other friends,
Yes. Yeah.
rescues the capybara.
The there's one thing I wanted to mention. There is a bit of a post-credit scene where they that I missed it the first time, and only after I read it did I watch it. And it's the sea. It's just like a shot of the sea,
Yep.
and then you see the fin come up. So apparently, it survived being being too
Or
heavy for its
maybe
own
another
weight
one.
on solid ground, or maybe it's another one. Like how literal. I never know how literally was it after, was it before? I mean, if how literally are we to take that?
I thought it was just I didn't think of it as like an MCU post credit scene.
Yeah,
I thought it was
Leviathan
just
will
kind of
return
a.
in Flow 2.
I just thought it was, maybe not pretty, but coming back to this, like you can think of things in the deep as frightening,
Mm,
or because you could have a psychoanalytical read of the film, right?
yes.
And that subconscious urges
Hmm.
that if you aren't frightened of, those subconscious urges that can save you,
Hmm.
you know,
Well, yeah,
that
and that's a
come
lot
to you
what
when you
fear
need
is.
them most.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing about the whale being the harbinger, maybe, or the barometer, or the great benign guardian, or what have you, and maybe maybe this was its final moment. I am a little bit like I never really settled on a full explanation for myself of the movie,
Yeah.
how all these things played together, but it's like a mythic thing, and it's not
Yeah.
exactly biblical. It's almost like they're creating their own kind of myth, I
I
think,
think
with
it's
this.
it's a biblical references,
Yes, yeah.
illusions and that.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, it isn't like it's not the Chronicles of Narnia,
Yeah.
but if you have a better than passing knowledge of the Bible, then you're going to see the Bible in this.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
as it's obviously Christian or something,
Mhm.
but you can see those things. But you can also see Eastern motifs
Yeah.
as well,
Mhm.
and that could also be part of why the whale looks the way it does.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Because it's a freaky
Because there's
deaky.
almost some Miyazaki
Yeah.
in there in the,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, Nausicaa and the Four Winds, or, some of those beasts within Miyazaki's more fantastical work.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see
Damn.
that definitely.
There's just so much. Yeah. For an
So there
85-minute
was-
movie,
Wow.
already, while still being a story,
Yeah.
it's like it's my heaven in a way. It's my happy place.
I
There's a
sort of
lot
wanna-
going on.
I want to watch it again.
Yeah.
At this point,
And
But,
unlike some movies, somebody on Threads, Jim, was doing the, hey, what's a movie you've seen once and don't need to see again?
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Come and see comes to mind. It's like, nope, don't need to see that.
Oh, there's a new one called just quickly. There's a new one called Warfare. I think that's going to be coming out, and it's basically sort of a nihilistic, Americans in Iraq kind of day in the life of, and they said it's like a bite-sized come and see, and I thought, boy, Rob will like this.
Well, you know what? We'll have to wait and see.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
All right, Jim. I think we're kind of getting at the end, but before I think we do have to move into final thoughts.
Mhm.
But Jim, before
Before
we
that-
get into before we do final thoughts, I am introducing a new segment to the show, and maybe even a new little mini series for the channel that I am calling Resist with Rob. Although perhaps it should be Learn to Resist with Rob, because I'm learning as well. Jim, as you know, our yo-yo economic war that's been declared upon us by that desiccated yam to the south of us, the Trump. It's coming up. It's over 3 months now
Mhm.
of this terrible nonsense. But we are, as I've said before, we are in solidarity with Americans or Mexicans, Greenlandic Inuit, regardless of what border you're behind. We're all getting screwed by the rich. And one of the ways they're screwing us, Jim, is goddamn generative AI. I recently, let me see if I can't, here it is. Jim, I was recently in a conversation on Threads with somebody who's talking about there's going to be a pro-AI section of the left and an anti-AI section. We got to come together on this. A thesis, antithesis, synthesis, a Hegelian thing. And I'm like, I mean, we went back and forth, you can see, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not buying that. But I'm like, I think the argument against generative AI, Jim, is there is a left. If you're a leftist, you should be against generative AI. And I want to outline a few reasons. This doesn't mean that you might be pro AI. I think this guy was coming from I think he's wrong, but he was not arguing in bad faith. I think his arguments are wrong.
Mhm.
But I want to give not just him an answer, but everyone who's left and maybe is like, there's something wrong with generative AI, or what is wrong with it? I want to give a few bullets just so people can kind of walk away going, okay, now I get it. Plus, I want to address some of what I think are bad faith arguments. But let's deal with one of the easiest ones to deal with is, where is it? Where am I? Yes. The environmental impacts of generative AI, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
And I will put a link to this page. But yeah, it sucks a huge amount of water, a huge amount of power. It is an environmental horror show. And from a progressive angle, how you cannot be for AI without this being addressed. But until this is addressed, you can't, I don't see a leftist, it's like, how are you okay with burning the world down?
Yeah.
Using all that water, all that energy, so you can do meme BS.
Yeah.
Another one, Jim, another problem with AI is, well, it's just stealing. You know what? And this isn't a rob from the rich, give to the poor stealing. It's literally taking artists' work, creators' work, and giving it over to the rich. Like, how can you be left and be okay with that? I'd say once you think about it, if you're a left-wing person, a worker, a member of the working class, or even you're upper middle class, or even rich and kind of have some sympathy for us peasants, us proletarians, you can't be generative AI because that is literally what it is. It takes this thing people make, chops it up into, the creative version of particle board, so that the rich can get away with just not paying as many workers. But last and certainly not least, my 3 reasons, Jim, is what I would call the public utility of it all. Or is there a public utility? One of the interesting things is, ask ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT whatever, and it gave me this answer. I mean, there's many ridiculous reasons you should not ask ChatGPT for, hey, what about this? One of them, though, is that it looks like it's actually giving away your ability to think.
Well, it's already taken our ability to concentrate.
But that there is some research already coming out that unless used in very narrow circumstances, your problem-solving skills are actually being eroded. But I would go further on this. It's the public utility. What's the problem it's solving for you and I? It's not relieving us of tedium. It's relieving us of the things we like to do. Art is a pleasure. Even the hard parts are good.
It's so much work.
So yeah, the public utility isn't there. It's if you want to, and it's not free. Never mind the world burning. You got to give a rich person some money for the real benefits of it. Why not just hire an artist? Sorry, but get your head out of your ass.
Yeah.
Really, again, the only actual utility is to private, is turning it over to private business. It allows industry to hire fewer people to do more, and not even good more, just more mediocrity. We're not getting better art out of this. We're getting crappier derivative art, and I say to whether you're left or right, do you ever come out of a movie going, boy, I really, really wish they had just made it a little more generic?
Yeah.
That's not a thing. I also want to talk to so those are basically my three reasons. There's only private interest here. It's actually burning our brains out. It's stealing.
Mhm.
And it's burning the world. It is a world-burning plagiarism machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Fire and arson and stupiding.
Now, of course, is there a way to negotiate this thing? Deal with the world burning, deal with the stealing, then maybe there's somewhere that this can be negotiated into aspects of our lives. But you got to deal with that first. Then tell me how it's actually good for me, for you, for us people. Not just for industry to go, I can fire a few more artists because they're always a pain in the ass. Jesus H. Christ. But Jim, before I wrap up this thing, I want to talk about a couple of what I think are the more, let's say, bad faith arguments.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is inevitability. And at its core, it's a bad faith argument. I think people of good faith are using it because the employer's jamming it down their throats. We see it on every Google search. It's right now, it seems like it's everywhere. But much like the talk of NFTs was everywhere, the blockchain, crypto, heck, how aren't we supposed to have cold fusion power right now? Isn't that just 2 years away? Most of our working lives, Jim, we're not kids anymore, and we've been hearing about cold fusion for 40 years. Inevitability is not an argument. It's a prediction of the future, and there are plenty of tech, especially things where I'm like, what problem is it actually solving? That I'm like, oh, I don't think it, I don't. Inevitability is the jury's still out on that.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that I think is a terrible. Again, people of good intent fall into it, but it's another bad faith argument. Is it's just a tool. Well, I'll tell you what else is just a tool? Lockpicks. It helps you pick a lock and get into somebody's house.
Mm-hmm.
Another tool is, Jim, a gun.
A magic wand.
It has a very specific use case.
Yeah.
Generative AI is a tool. Absolutely. It's a tool to steal people's art. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's, but if you want to dig a little deeper, let's say, ask ChatGPT. If I type in a question into Google, it gives me search results, and it's still up to me to figure it out. Kind of weigh and judge and use my brain. Basically, there is a tool that brings a library to me. I still have to make a call on what I want out of the library. I still have to make a judgment. That has some public utility. That's a great tool. Ask ChatGPT, apparently it's going to rot my brain. If I use Midjourney or any of these other Sora or whatever, I'm basically using it as a tool to steal somebody else's art instead of making my own. So yeah, there is my first episode of Resist with Rob. And why I think any reasonable leftist, once they think about it, they work through these bullets that I have provided, that I have rambled, they should come to the same conclusion is, yeah, that they should be anti generative AI. Again, allowing for, hey, if you at least deal with the theft, deal with the world burning, we can negotiate the other stuff, but those got to be dealt with first. Jim, do you have anything to add to my first episode of Resist with Rob before we get into final thoughts?
I got a couple things to add, actually. Just really briefly, the gal who I believe did our wonderful logo,
Sarah Sumere, yes.
Yeah, Sarah. I just saw her on Threads, and she had posted something, maybe one of her great severance photos, works, I should say. And somebody said, AI. And she goes, no, this is me. So that's one thing, is just to, trust the artist. When they say well, an artist, we happen to know, in a way. So that was something that she had to struggle with. I mean, she addressed it earlier on today. And then she posted, I think, her method and that kind of thing too. So that was kind of interesting. The other thing I was going to add was that this is sort of along those lines too, but it's the whole playing with reality thing. And really quickly, I joined a photo club, and I'm amazed at the people that want to change their pictures. Sometimes it's with AI technology, but it's just like, oh, I'd move this tree from there to there, and they just they want to just change the whole composition of the picture rather than, leaving the picture alone, using different filters and that kind of thing. That there's some street photographers out there that won't even crop, that they think that, that's the Lars von Trier side of things, where they don't even zoom in. So anyway, just a couple of approaches to art and some of the things that come up that I thought was kind of interesting.
I
when
appreciate
you were
that,
mentioning
Jim.
that, yeah. But
All
give Sarah a look. Sorry, that way. Our logo. I can never get this straight. I'm horrible with this. There we go. Nope, that's wrong. Guessed wrong.
Here, why don't you'll oh geez. Where did your overlay go, Jim?
Uh-oh.
There you go.
There we go.
Can't believe I edited. Must have taken it off for some stupid reason. Anyway, folks, that leads us to, and we're still in the spoiler zone, but I think it's time to get into final thoughts. Jim, why don't you anything else you wanted to add to our conversation about flow?
Sure. Well, I had one question that I was going to bring up earlier. One comment I was going to make is that the music, the soundtrack to this, is also something that I think has been a little bit overlooked. It's on point. Like it's a solid synthy soundtrack. I loved it. I'm like, who did the music? And of course, it's Gintz. The guy was the director, he was the editor, and he handled the music along with another musician. But just a solid soundtrack. The other thing I was going to ask you earlier, and it doesn't have to be a long one, but if this was not a Latvian work, maybe it was something a little more Western, maybe something not necessarily from Pixar, but something American, how do you think it would be different? Would it be different, and how do you think it would be different?
You know what? I can't.
Like, would it be more?
I think this stands on the shoulders of Pixar. No, Pixar's made some really beautiful.
Oh yeah, not a criticism.
Like poignant, non-comic shorts. In a way, it'd be interesting to interview Gintz himself. I wouldn't be surprised if Pixar was one of his key inspirations. But yeah, does it have a European vibe? Mm-hmm. Sure. I don't know though. Like this one's a tougher one to parse out, right? Because
Mhm.
it is so, well, perhaps some Eastern influences. It's a very Western film, but
Mhm.
because there is no, it's still a, it is an, it's a 3-act structure. You
Mhm.
see those beats. Um, is it artistic? Yes, but it could have been Canadian. It could have been, I, I am not sure it really has a Latvian feel. Now, mind
Yeah.
you, my come and see. Well, it's more Lithuanian, but of the region.
Mhm.
Um, I, I, all I could really say is it's a Western artist who made this film. A
Yeah.
small group of Western artists. Uh,
Mhm.
if a big studio did it, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
but I could
Yeah. That,
imagine
that that actually.
American, I could imagine American making this film. I have a hard time imagining Disney making this film.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a that's a good point. Is a good distinction is that the size, like this was a small, notoriously compared to the whatever 200 million
Tiny.
it took for to make Moana 2. This is a very very much a smaller thing. I just some of the times when you watch something that's maybe not Japanese, not American, that I mentioned Watership Down earlier. That was a I'm still
Very.
recovering. I think we both are from that, seeing
Well,
it as
that and the
kids.
Plague Dogs. Did you ever see that?
I don't think so, but
Oh,
often
another, like, even a more,
I'll have to see it now.
more bummer end.
Ooh,
Oh,
but
it's a tough watch.
more recently, since since we've had kids, the Triplets of Belleville, a French movie, I
Yeah.
saw that and it was just like totally like none of the animation that I'd ever seen before, and it's still like it's a freaky movie, and I love every minute of it. So
It's. I'm glad you asked that question, Jim. Let me throw this. Let me add this to that. I'm wondering. Yeah. This is the first movie that was done in what was otherwise, like, when I think of this movie, I think, wow, this, because of story. Now, mind you, I'm thinking of this generative AI nonsense and everything
mhm,
that's going on right now. Um, but I'm watching this and I'm like, this is what happens when you have a storyteller using these tools like Blender and that.
mhm.
Because this could have really just been a really cool walkthrough of an environment of a video game, like a guy showing off his reel.
Mhm, mhm.
And it wasn't. It's a story. There are characters, but I'm wondering, coming back to almost that international feel. But one of the things that is common is it is a anyone who's played a modern video game would go, "Oh, I know this world. It's got a Myst quality. Do you remember Myst
Oh
and
yeah,
Riven?
yeah, no, it
Like
was
it's got
huge.
that going
Yeah.
on." But even later, I do. This may shock you, Jim, but I own a couple of video games, including all bloody things Assassin's Creed.
Oh yeah.
I've owned 2 of them, not because I'm a big fan of Assassin's Creed, but
Mm.
their later versions, because they place them in certain parts of history, they have these discovery tours. One set in Egypt. That was their very first one that they did
Oh
back
yeah.
in 2017 or 2018. And then Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which
Mhm,
is set in the Greek world.
mhm.
And so it's got this great walkthrough. And because I've been to some of these places, the Great Pyramids, the Parthenon, I'm like, well, I want to play a game where they've dressed it up as how historians have interpreted it,
Mhm.
what they
Yeah.
think it could look like. And it's like, I've walked these spaces as they are now. I'd like a virtual walkthrough of these spaces.
No, that's very cool. Yeah.
And this, I think, is the aesthetic that this has. So it's not necessarily a national aesthetic, it is a modern video game aesthetic
Oh yeah.
that anyone would kind of get. Like, I mean, there's a language, a vocabulary here that is very much bound in video games.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, even maybe
Yeah.
even you think about using the tiller
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
very similar to, you know, using a joystick, the way the tiller's used.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
You know?
And without the side quests necessarily, but yeah, which is
Thank God for that.
yeah, exactly.
You know? Anything else you wanted to add?
No, just I sort of want to see it again, but yeah, I gotta. So many things I gotta check out. It's crazy.
For me, maybe just it is remarkable what a small group made this. Now, it took several years. They did bring in other people. This is a co-production. It may have started in Latvia and ended in Latvia, run from these great Latvian filmmakers, but there's French, French, Belgians involved in bringing this to the screen. But it also kind of shows you story is king, you know, and sound. Yeah. No dialogue, but great sound.
Yes.
Like, you know, you're right. The soundtrack's on point, but the sound design is there. Like, it really is an experience without you going, oh, I'm being manipulated by the music.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's never overpowering. It's never
No.
on the nose. You know. All right.
Yeah. Good point.
On that, I want to say to our Korean visitor, to Mr. Brett Woods, thanks for popping in. One more, beg for a like, a subscribe, and maybe a ringy dingy of that bell.
See, I was set that time.
Yes, you were. That was like, it's almost like we planned this.
Practical effects.
All right, everybody. Thanks.
See you later.
Good night, everybody.